Guys, Germany's going to war with Russia. The schnitzel is hitting the fitzel. Before I dive into that, I gotta say, the most irritating thing about YouTubers and social media influencers in general is when they don't value the time of their viewers and they don't get to the damn point of the video fast enough. So forgive me in advance for just taking 30 seconds, just 30 seconds of your time to say that I greatly value your time. It's an honor and a privilege that day in and day out, you sit here listening to the ramblings of some Canadian yokel about the geopolitical turmoil in the world and the prospect of nuclear Armageddon. It's something I am grateful for. You could be taking that time to do something far more constructive, I'm sure, and it's something I just want you to know that I greatly value it, okay? This is not something we can take for granted. Your time is so valuable right now, so thank you very much. And the reason why I say that is because one of these days we may be offline. I don't know what's going to come first, cancellation or the apocalypse, electromagnetic pulse, or I fall out a window. One of these things is going to happen first, okay? Let's hope that it's neither of those things and we live happily ever after in an artificial intelligence-induced utopia, but it's doubtful at this point. Here we go, guys. This is the synopsis of what we're going to talk about today, then we'll get into the nitty-gritty details. Germany deploying 4,000 troops near the Russian border, Kaliningrad in particular. The Ruskies are not going to like that. That's why the new phrase is the schnitzel is hitting the fitzel. And that's not funny because people's lives are at stake. People are dying every day. So not to be facetious, but just as a coping strategy to get through from day to day, it's the schnitzel hitting the fitzel. Already they have 1,500 troops there and they can deploy 5,000 more in 10 days in an emergent situation if the Baltic states are attacked. NATO is also expanding its rapid response force from 13 to 30,000. Putin gave another speech today. Apparently it was cryptic in some people's minds. We're going to talk about what some of the double meanings were with respect to what he said. We have NATO exercise underway in Lithuania. Why is Lithuania such a hotbed of activity in the coming weeks? Well, you have the NATO Vilnius summit coming. You have Belarus, who's a stone's throw away from there, who now has nuclear weapons and mercs. Apparently, the Wagner group is going to be building a camp within the next week in order to house 8,000 Wagner troops. Are these going to be the convicts, or are these going to be the hardened mercs who have done their tours around the world? I guess time is going to tell, but apparently there's more to the Prigozhin-Putin saga than meets the eye. NATO is also changing its Air Force status from air policing to combat. This is in response to some close calls like you're seeing below with an RC-135 surveillance plane, which was being escorted by two UK Typhoon jets. This was intercepted by two Russian Su-27 fighter jets over the Black Sea. Things are getting tense, my friends. We need to be ready non-stop. Now, speaking of Prigozhin, what is up with Prigozhin? We're going to talk about Prigozhin as well because he also gave a speech today. Now, the big news, once again, is that Zelensky continues running on and droning on about this nuclear incident that is coming at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. They're doing area evacuation drills in and around Zaporozhye and in Kiev. They've given their National Security and Defense Council 1 month to do a complete overhaul and inventory of bomb shelters, specifically in the Zaporozhye region, but in all of the contested regions throughout the country. CBRN, also known as CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear gear is being distributed to Russian soldiers near the nuclear power plant, and in the coming days, they're going to be conducting exercises, including road closures and a corresponding reversal of sanitary checkpoints, where they're going to be checking for radiation, just doing a whole variety of different exercises, and the pharmacies are clearing out of Thyrosafe and potassium iodide medication, which is what you take to block the uptake of radioactive radiation into your thyroid gland in such case of a radiological emergency. That is being cleared out of the stores in Ukraine Alexei Arestovich, who's a part of the Ukrainian government, has said that they can build a nuclear weapon in a short period of time and that they either need security guarantees from NATO or they're going to build a nuke. How are they going to build a nuke? Well, they need fissionable materials. Ukraine does have nuclear power plants. In fact, they could easily build a nuclear weapon. The only thing preventing them from doing this is the oversight and the auditing of the International Atomic Energy Agency. As far as I know, apparently the FSB, that is the Russian intelligence service, claims that they did a bust just a few days ago of some Ukrainians who are trying to purchase cesium-137 in order to make a nuclear weapon. That's Russian state-sponsored media, just giving you both sides of the story, okay? Come July 11th, I believe, that's when the Vilnius summit starts, we are going to know, finally, once and for all, whether or not NATO is going to give security guarantees to Ukraine. It is looking very much like NATO is going to war with Russia. I repeat, NATO is about to go to war with Russia. We all need to understand what this means. I am not being dramatic at all. If you have not been witnessing the videos of the front line footage of not only Ukrainian soldiers, but soldiers and mercenaries from all over the world fighting in this massive East versus West conflict, it is coming to our borders and it is coming fast. Understand that all of the signs are there for people to see. Thousands of data points point towards imminent escalation. Imminent in the sense is it days, weeks, months. Eventually, NATO is going to reach a point where it's looking across and it can see Russian soldiers on the horizon. And when that point comes, you better make sure you have everything squared away. Pray that it doesn't happen in the next week. Pray that it doesn't happen in the next month or even next year so that you have time. I do believe that this is an untenable state of affairs. It's inevitable. It's inexorable. We are heading towards a clash between East and West. And if you still don't believe that that's going to happen, then that's perfectly fine. Maybe you're more of an optimist. Maybe you have good reasons. Maybe you have an argument that maybe this is all overblown and it's just the machinations of the evil elites who want to get us all on lockdown and blah, 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 and other tinfoil nuttery. If that's what you believe, fine. If that's your coping strategy, myself personally, I'm getting the hell off the grid as soon as I possibly can. So don't be surprised if one day I just stopped posting and I didn't fall out of a window. I just decided, you know what, it's time to go. Until that time, here we are together, my friends. Wagner in Belarus, opening a new camp accommodating 8,000 soldiers. Apparently, this is going to be completed by Tuesday afternoon. The first camp is being built in the Osipovichi, I totally butchered that, Mogilev region, 200 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. A 2-hour drive the way the crow flies. Belarus, it should be known, has also recently done mobilization exercises because they are concerned that the surrounding countries are plotting some sort of terrorist attacks or coup inside their country. Okay, so things are escalating. The war is about to expand. And I apologize because I'm always communicating this in a very dramatic, exaggerated, histrionic fashion. And the reason why is because when we are finally right, it's all going to seem like I didn't do enough. It's going to seem like I didn't scream at the top of my lungs enough if and when it all happens, okay? So I'm hoping that I look like a fool. I hope that my predictions are never vindicated and that I am wrong so my children can have children and their children can have children. And I don't even know if people are going to be having kids. It's probably going to be artificial wombs at that point, but you catch my drift. I hope that I'm wrong, okay? Latvia has suspended all visas to Russians, so no more Russians traveling into Latvia. That's a sign that war cometh. Prigozhin is making another speech. He claims that it never was a coup. In fact, the purpose was to alert the Kremlin to the severity of the situation on the front over concerns that Kiev was planning some nuclear provocation. Now, I will say, in spite of the fact that I think Prigozhin is very stupid for what he did, from the Russians' point of view, I mean, why would you do something that was so incredibly divisive and almost resulted in massive civil unrest that indeed would have been exploited by Ukraine and its NATO allies? Why would you do something so incredibly stupid? So it leads me to believe that this guy has absolutely no political sense about him whatsoever, even though he is really just the face of the Wagner. He's not in commanding control of the Wagner forces as far as I know. I was listening to an expert on this topic the other day, and they were saying that he's basically just the spokesperson for Wagner, okay? He is not the guy who gives the orders on the front line. There's a bunch of commanders who are actually in charge of the Wagner forces. So it's amazing to me that somebody you think like that would be smart enough and wise enough to be more diplomatic. If that was their primary role, being the face of the organization, okay, this mercenary organization that has been used for a variety of different heinous and atrocious activities around the world and in Russia itself, whether it's in terms of suppressing various things, and I'm not even going to get into all the details, but it hasn't always been wielded for the cause of good. So that is definitely not good. We have a U.S. Nimitz-class supercarrier deployed just 150 miles from China. I wonder if the Chinese are going to like that. Who knows? Maybe there's even nuclear weapons on board that supercarrier. We have North Korea warning of an imminent nuclear threat, saying that the risk of nuclear war is higher than it's ever been. Russia is soon going to have stealth submarines that contain nuclear weapons, ones that simply are impossible to detect. And I regret to inform you that the wildfire situation is still raging out of control. The record for wildfires in Canada this year has been completely and utterly smashed. Smoke is making its way to the East Coast once again. I'm going to show you some figures that are mind-blowing figures, absolutely staggering how much of Quebec, province that is the size, half the size of Europe, is a huge portion of the province is on fire still. And the fire season hasn't even really peaked yet. That's the problem. Now, anyways, let's just talk. What you're seeing behind me here, if I haven't already explained it, is a RC-135 being tailed by some Russian Su-27 jets. This was being escorted by Typhoon, UK, British Typhoon fighter jets. So this is just another instance of a very close call. One of these days they're going to overstep the boundaries as Ukraine becomes successful, if it ever does, in its counteroffensive. These sorts of spy planes are going to be taken out because, of course, they are feeding them information, right? Now, if it gets to the point where the Ukrainians are able to establish a bridgehead as they currently are on the left bank of the Dnieper River and gain a foothold and start making their way to Crimea in whatever form that takes, or in and around the nuclear power plant, then that's when these things start getting shot down by the Russians. Because if they don't, and that means the imminent defeat of Crimea. So, and Crimea is something they simply can't let go. They may be able to live without the annexed territories, but it's unlikely they're ever going to give that up. And this is the task that Putin has ahead of him, is he came out today and many people thought he was way too soft, okay? Because many people, the Russian media, when this thing happened, this was blown up as a coup attempt on every single Russian media agency. This was framed as an attempt to take out Vladimir Putin, and Evgeny Prigozhin was going to install himself in some way, shape, or form as the strong man behind whoever was put in power. This was the narrative that Russia was pushing, not the Western media. Okay, Russia today had all kinds of segments on the foiled coup attempt by the Wagner group. Okay, they were calling it that, they were framing it as such. And today, Putin came out, in some people's minds, incredibly soft. Now, is this just the Russian art of deception? Or is this what it looks like? Many people are still on the fence. There are some people who are very confident that this was just Prigozhin doing something incredibly impulsive and stupid, and when he realized that his life was going to be lost, he turned the thing around. There are other people who think that this is part of some elaborate ploy to get the Wagner organization into Belarus. The only problem with that plan is that they could simply do that. It's not a secret, okay? If they wanted to get the Wagner into Belarus, they could easily do that. There would be no problems in them doing that, because the Wagner organization, which is a mercenary organization, very similar to the Foreign Legion in that it has an allegiance to Russia, but it cannot legally operate inside Russia itself, okay? So they needed to go somewhere else. If they wanted them to go to Belarus, they could have just sent them there. They don't need this whole elaborate theatrics where they put everybody on edge, and then Putin is apparently being perceived by many people as being too weak and soft in his approach, possibly impacting his ability to govern. Now, some people will say, well, and this is what I said on the first day. I was the first one to say that this whole thing was just to consolidate Russian power, okay? Now, that definitely is a positive side effect from a hardliner war hawk perspective, is that indeed this is one more step towards total full-blown mobilization. Now, I'm not in Russia, so I don't know what the sentiment of people is on the street. But you could see that there was at least some people who were welcoming the Wagner forces. These guys are kind of like rock stars. That iconic image, if you're in Russia, of the guy holding the flag in Bakhmut with the dust settling in the distance. That is something, that was a moment for Russians, okay? And so these guys are like rock stars. So when they have a grievance, like Prigozhin says, a protest with the Russian Ministry of Defense, who they claim are incompetent, and let's face it, when you look at how this thing has played out, if it's not incompetence, then it has to be 4D chess at the expense of a lot of human life, because they've made a lot of mistakes. You know, whether it was the 40-mile columns that went into Kiev and were blown out of the water, or blown off the roads, I should say, at the beginning of this whole thing, so many military operations that were botched, the failed logistics, and just the lack of leadership from the top down. People are getting fed up. And if there ever was a time to declare total war, if there ever was a time to fully mobilize, to create a massive draft, to take the country to war, this was the time. The only reason why they're probably not doing that is they don't want to lose investor confidence. And this is the only reason I can possibly think is the macroeconomic implications. It might not be good for the Russian ruble in the short term. Maybe in the long term it's very good if they win. It might not be good for the Russian stock market. It might not be good for the Russian economy, a nation which is fully mobilized for war. For some aspects of the economy, for other aspects, it's going to be great, because you need a lot of bullets. You need a lot of Rosie the Riveters working in factories when you're in war mobilization mode. And it appears as though the calls for Putin to be more hardline, to get more aggressive, are escalating in Russia. And like I said, the last thing you want is civil war on Russia, because that increases the likelihood of nuclear Armageddon tenfold. If Prigozhin was to have succeeded in starting a war with the Chechens and the Wagner group and the rest of the Russian military who supported Putin, that would have been absolutely devastating. They would have lost the war. NATO would have moved in. The counteroffensive, the real one, would have started. And this, as a failsafe now, it appears as though Zelensky is talking up this threat of the nuclear power plant. It's like there was two plans. One of the plans was, okay, maybe the Wagner is going to go in there and stir some stuff up. Maybe Wagner had some bad intelligence. Some people think that he was coaxed into doing this by some maybe more intelligent intelligence officers from other foreign services, MI6, Mossad, what's the other one? The CIA, CSIS in Canada. I don't think they do anything but censor the internet. But you catch my drift. Maybe people far smarter than him told him that, hey, there's a chance you can do this. Or maybe somebody's whispering in his ear. He seems like the kind of guy, if you could easily rile him up. And he would start saying and doing very impulsive things. So maybe this is what happened. Maybe he had bad intel. But the intel was pretty good. It was pretty successful, with the exception of a few lives lost, not to make light of that. But all in all, he had a clear and open path to Moscow, which would have only seen a limited amount of human life lost. But as soon as he heard that Kadyrov and friends were en route, that's when he turned around. This is why I've said all along, it's a genius strategy of Putin to have all of these different factions of your military triangulated and fighting with one another. Authoritarian pro tip number one. Don't just have one general who can stab you in the back. Don't just have two, but have 3 or 4 separate cliques in your military, okay, who can keep the others in control. They call that synoptical surveillance. Now, what else do we have to talk about today? Did I show you guys the photometer? It is off the charts. It's at 92 today. And it's the result of the fact that Germany's sending 4,000 troops to the border of Kaliningrad, and the markets don't know what to do with themselves with this whole Russia situation, because the markets are starting to realize, the markets are finally realizing that World War III is on the horizon. And this is when things get very, very precarious. And the only thing that I think is a safe bet at this point in time is the things that are value stocks. Like oil. Oil is predicted, if we make it to 2045, it's going to surge. Demand is going to surge by 23%. We know that the production is likely going to be less when that time comes, meaning that, hey, that's a safe bet. Right now, oil is cheap, as are the oil stocks. Now, here's what Wagner wants to do. Or here is what some of the conspiracy guys are saying. So they're saying that a part of this, I think they're calling this the Surovikin plan. Maybe this was a plan cooked up by General Armageddon, I don't know. But that they would enter from Belarus from the north. I wish I had a clear map for you here, okay? So this is Ukraine. Just for people who maybe don't understand the geography of this that well, and I'm not a geographical expert. This is Belarus. The idea is, this is Kiev. This is where all the Ukrainian troops are. This is where, Poland is, and they send all the stuff into Ukraine from this direction. So, if this is where the Ukrainians are fighting, and they keep lobbing missiles to here, they can get to Lviv with missiles, but the accuracy is a little less so because it's obviously further away, even though they can shoot from Belarus. But still, it's ideally you would cut off supplies. Okay, so you would make this into a rump state of sorts where it was completely cut off from the West, and the only way it could get stuff in is if it was flown in. So the idea is, you, instead of taking Kiev, because they don't have the manpower to do that, Wagner was not sent there for the purpose of taking out Kiev. Maybe spearheading some sort of offensive at some point in time, but they would need hundreds of thousands of troops for that. I'm not a military person, but based on what they did in Bakhmut and other places in this type of modern warfare, you need a lot of guys to hold a city like down. And let's face it, if they did that, that city would be completely and utterly destroyed. So let's hope it doesn't come to that. What they want to do is they want to cut off all the supply lines, okay? And so there's actually specific towns that they would go into, like Kovel. They would go into Kovel, cut down here, Kovel, Lutsk, and then Lviv. And I mean, Lviv in itself is a huge city. The idea that they would be able to take this city is very unlikely because there's incredibly pro-Western. You see, in the in the eastern part of Ukraine, there's a lot of Russian-speaking, very pro-Russian people in that part. So if they take it over there, the risk of insurgency is lower. But if they were to do something in Lviv, there'd just be constant guerrilla warfare. They're never going to give this up. And of course, Poland would get involved. NATO would get involved if that happened, undoubtedly. So what they probably want to do is maybe cut it in half, maybe not go to Lviv, bypass Lviv, set up some sort of line here or whatever it is they're going to do, and cut their way down to Transnistria, which is part of Moldova here. And anyways, there's lots of great war channels that break down what possible plans may come. But this is when the nuclear card gets played. What nuclear card? That Zaporozhye nuclear power plant ticking time bomb card. Now, if the Ukrainians are not able to break through on this side of the river, right now, in this place right here, just, I guess it would be slightly east of Kherson, this bridge, I'm surprised it's still standing. They established a bridgehead on this side of the river. It's one of my big heads in the way. They've established a bit of a bridgehead. They're gaining a little bit of a foothold here. This is deceiving because right now this is a lot lower than it was before as a result of the dam bursting. So maybe they can bring vehicles across as well. I'm not sure where what the bridge situation looks like or if this is up to date, the satellite imagery. I'm guessing it isn't. But that's what they're trying to do. So if they can't gain this foothold there, then what's probably going to happen, and if this counteroffensive goes nowhere, which it appears to be right now, I mean, the Russians have this place mined to the, I was going to say the TITS, okay? It is mined to the neck. And demining operations are costly. They take a lot of time. They're very high risk, and there's some horrifying videos that have been released of just showing you the proximity of these mines. It's not like there's a mine here and then there's one 20 feet away. These mines in some cases are 4 or 5 feet apart, and there's hundreds of them, these little mines. And the likelihood of you being able to walk through one of these fields without detonating one is virtually impossible, and a lot of people are dying. So this is what the Ukrainians are up against. And if they can't make any headway there, they're going to have no other options but to somehow try to get NATO involved in the conflict. Now, NATO has basically given the incentive to do so. They said, don't worry, Ukraine. If there's any nuclear incident, then we'll come to your rescue. In fact, this is a resolution that is currently being tabled by the Senate in the United States, that Article 5 will be invoked if a radiological incident occurs in Ukraine because the wind might blow towards NATO countries, and that effectively is an attack on NATO countries, okay? So that's the argument they're trying to make, and this is convenient because it's kind of like this card that can get played at some point. So if the Russians are winning, it only makes sense if the Russians are losing. I have to emphasize this. I talked about this yesterday. It only makes sense that the Russians would do their own nuclear power plant that they're currently in full and total control of. There's a river that separates them and the Ukrainians around this nuclear power plant. The only way they're giving that up is if they're losing, okay? And if they're losing, there's no reason why the Ukrainians would do it, obviously. The Ukrainians would only have incentive to do it if the Russians were winning and all was lost and their ranks were decimated and people were running scared and everything was collapsing around them. That's the only reason. This is like the final card that could be played in order to bring NATO into the conflict. Look, they're doing all the preparations for it. They have all of the sensors in place. They have all of the precautions and the exercises, the evacuation routes, the bunkers. They have the CBRN gear. The Russians have the same and are doing the same exercises. It's only a matter of time. Eventually, we're going to say, how did we not see it coming? Because it's only a matter of time. Whether that or some nuclear incident as a result of Wagner in Belarus having some measure of proximity to the tactical nuclear weapons there. What the hell is going on with that situation? Ask yourself this question. What the hell is Putin thinking? Look, Putin has complete control over Lukashenko. The only reason why Lukashenko's in power is because Vladimir Putin has his back. Why the hell are they going to turn the nuclear weapons around? Are they going to say anything about it? You know, because why would you want them in that country while you concurrently had tactical nuclear weapons there when you've seen what just happened? If Putin genuinely, sincerely believes that the Wagner organization was attempting to foment a coup, why would you put these people, give them their freedom? I understand why you would give them their freedom, because you don't want to start a civil war. There's lots of people saying, oh, Putin's being too weak and blah, 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 blah. He had no choice. What is he going to do? Start a war and then lose the war and lose everything? One of the Russian state-sponsored propagandists the other day, they said something very, very intelligent, like they typically do, because the Russians are very, very good with language, I found. I don't know if it's something about if they've written a lot of famous literature or what, but she said, in a civil war, nobody wins. When it's brother killing brother, fratricide as it's called, nobody wins in a civil war because you always lose. At least if you're fighting somebody else, you can possibly win. Now, it sounds crazy to say that, but it's true. So if they would have went to civil war, and it wouldn't have just ended with the Chechens and the Wagner having some limited skirmishes, it would have escalated. And everybody would have taken a side, because you have people in Russia right now who want Putin to put the smack down. They're sick and tired of this slow going. They want him to get this problem dealt with quick. Now, Putin is not doing that for whatever reasons he has. This is the guy that took the country from nothing and made it something. Okay? So this is why people are saying, okay, we'll listen to you. We'll follow your lead for now. Anyways, that's the shizzy that's going on right now, man. This world is going absolutely insane. What else haven't I talked about? So yeah, Stoltenberg, he's sending in the troops. Now, Putin is meeting, as we speak, well, it's probably a few hours ago, with his military generals and whatnot. None of them they're all dressed in business attire, which is interesting. Because usually when he has these meetings, they're all in BDUs. Now, the one guy's in BDUs, but everybody else is dressed in a formal business attire, which is interesting. Are they trying to make a statement? Are they trying to minimize panic by not dressing everybody up and trying to not make it look like they're at war, right? He still refers to this as a special military operation, and now maybe calling it a counter-terrorist operation, which is one step up from that. The next thing you call it is a war. And if you have Putin in there with a bunch of guys in BDUs, which has been the case in the past, especially around this point in time, then people are going to start to get scared. Understand, if you were a Russian in the last 72 hours, you thought that war was about to break out in your country. All of those people who supported Putin all along had to make a choice. Do I continue my support or do I not? They were all faced in a way with their own mortality. Now, for some people, that's going to motivate them to want to fight. For others, it's going to motivate them to want to flight. You're going to see more brain drain. You're going to see people wanting to leave the country. Maybe that's what Putin is concerned about, the economic implications. You're going to see others say, hey, enough is enough. What is causing this issue in our military? The Wagner says the issue is the fact that the Russian MOD is out of touch with what's going on the front line. They don't understand the situation. These old geezers are incompetent. They've never done any battle in their lifetimes with the exception of Surovikin, which I don't even think I see the guy at the table here. And they're concerned that this war needs to be prosecuted far more aggressively, and eventually this is the pressure that Putin is going to be under. But if you ask me, that's a pretty easy problem to fix. Okay? You want me to declare total war on Ukraine and mobilize all our forces and everyone, and you got to get the public past a certain critical mass of accepting that and pushing that before you potentially do political damage. So maybe that's Putin's plan, is to, gin up enough anger towards the Ukrainians or NATO, or just build up that Russian patriotism to the point where it's very seamless into that transition of full-blown mobilization. Maybe that's what's happening here. I don't understand it at this point in time, but I tell you, man, These Russians, they got patience. They got a lot of patience. I think that's about it today, guys. Keep on prepping, man, because the shizzy is hitting the fizzy. Let's talk about these fires really quick here. Yeah, Prigozhin came out and gave a statement today. I would encourage you all to go check that. It's about 11 minutes long. He explains, which wasn't a very good explanation, but at the same time, he had me thinking, well, maybe he was just sincerely upset and was trying to stage a protest of sorts. But he distinctly went and commandeered the military facilities in Rostov. They were shooting at the door there. There's no excuse for that when you're in a constitutionally elected democracy / autocracy, authoritarian, whatever it is in Russia right now. So anyways, he's got some explaining to do, but things don't make sense across the map. Things still don't make sense. Is it a psyop? Is it just as it is, and it's the ramblings of a crazy guy who's seen so much death and destruction that he's lost his brain, or something else? Let me know. Fill in the blanks. This is what the Canadian wildfire situation looks like. Oh boy, what do we got here? No thanks. Okay, so this is what's going on. Look at these fires, man. This is where it's heading. Right now, it's heading to Detroit, Chicago, Kentucky, St. Louis, Springfield, Indianapolis, Charlotte, Jacksonville. And it's all going to wrap around to the Big Apple within the next couple days. We got some big blasts of smoke. Look at the size of these fires, man. Look at the size of that. That is just massive. This is, you see that in the corner down? Oh, you can't see. 20 kilometers. So that distance is 20 kilometers. So 20, 40, 60, dumb moment there, 80, 100, 120. Then you square that, man, it's a lot. Like we've already, to put in perspective, okay, the average Canadian season is 256,000 hectares burned. That's around 600,000 acres or so. This year already, and that's 256,000 for the entire year. We have already, and we're only not even halfway through the season yet. The season can go all the way into October, okay? We've already burned, get this, 6 million hectares. And the fires are still raging. 6 million hectares, that's like 14.5 million acres burned. Man, the boreal forest is vast. 14 million, and we are only halfway through. This could be, this is going to be a barn burner of a year, to put it in perspective. This is going to be crazy, man. All I can say is, my friends, we're living in the age of consequences. You got to get your shit together. You got to get everything. You got to, self-mastery should be at the top of everybody's agenda at this point in time. There are no excuses. Prepping can be used to save lives. There's no better reason to prepare than to ensure, or to improve your life, than to ensure that if things get bad, which they will get bad, SHTF is coming to a theater near you soon. It won't be televised. When it comes to you, you're going to want to be ready. You're going to want to be the best possible version of yourself you can be, physically, emotionally, financially, and even for those of you who like this, spiritually. Okay, I'm agnostic, means I don't know. I'm a scientist, okay? That means I don't know, I know what I don't know. This is all speculation, a lot of my theories about what's coming, but it's informed speculation. But what I can say is you got to get your mind right in all those ways, man, because you're going to be kicking yourself if it comes down to the point where your children or people you love, and this is a good way of looking at it, okay? Think about it this way. You may not want to do it for yourself, but ask yourself, is there somebody you love who, if things went south, that you would need to be in the best possible position you could be in to help? I don't care if that's a mother, a grandmother, children, cousins, a friend, anybody you love in your life. Maybe you're a person, you don't have any children. Maybe you don't have many friends. But man, you just want to do something good for your community. You want to be that person who's going to take care of people when the time comes. Do it for them, okay? And remember that prepping isn't just about squirreling things away and not living your life. It is all about self-mastery. This is just like a martial art. It's exactly like a martial art. You may never get into a fight for your entire life, but ask any black belt who's trained day in and day out, who has, by some people's standards, wasted thousands of hours in their life training for this fight that never may come. Ask them if they thought it was a waste. They'll say, hell no. They got a lot out of it. They got peace of mind. They got discipline. They were a better person in other aspects of their lives. They were content. And again, do it for yourself. I get constant questions about people around me just don't get it. I try to wake up my family, then shut up about it. Okay, this is about you. You can't control what other people can do. In fact, it's much better if they see you doing something and you're kind of quiet about it. Not in the sense that they're worried that you're going to do something stupid, because that can happen too. Why is Buddy stockpiling all this stuff? And, might get some Ted Kaczynski vibes. But in a way where you're doing it responsibly, prudently, but you're not making a big display about it, okay? You're not disturbing the dinner table every night, warning about impending Armageddon. You're just doing it. You're doing it in a way that is measured. You're still going out. You're having fun with their life. And they see you somewhat preoccupied with what's going on in the world. That's going to motivate the hell out of them. It's not you ranting and raving about the shit's going to hit the fan. Look, believe it or not, anybody who knows me in real life, I don't say a word about prepping to them. Not because I'm worried about, they're going to come to my house when the shizzy hits the fizzy. Look, man, I'm pretty much screwed. With the exception of some secret locations that I have. Everybody knows where I am, okay? Everybody knows what I'm about, but they also know what I'm about. So they probably ain't going to be the first ones through the door if they're smart. But what I'm saying is that people will respond better if you're not so forward about things. If you just kind of do it tangentially, if it's in the periphery of your focus, so to speak, and they say, this guy is smart enough not to be all dramatic about stuff like Canadian Prepper is, but he appears to be prepping, or he appears to be interested in this preparedness thing, but he's also going about life as normal. That's something I respect. Right? They're not going to respect some ranting, raving madman who's going on every day about how the Russians are about to nuke us. Okay? So there's a way to do this in a way that is responsible and is going to yield the best results. And really, at the end of the day, this is about you. You cannot and will not change people. People have to kind of come to the conclusion that their own well-being is their responsibility on their own. How they get there is going to be different for every person. Okay, for me, it was through the path of realizing how vulnerable I was as we became more technologically dependent. I asked myself one night, I said, if the grid went down today, how long could I survive? And the answer was not very long. That motivated me, that motivated the hell out of me to be the absolute best man I can possibly be for my family, for my children, for everybody else around me. And if you ask any of my family members, I don't say a word about prepping. I never talk about it. The only time I talk about it is, if I'm going to go to the gun range, or, I'm very quiet about it because I don't want to burden them with that. They need to come to that conclusion on their own. Okay? And then that way it's their responsibility too, because as Praxis Prepper identified on the channel a couple weeks ago, if people are just motivated by fear, that's only going to get you so much gas in the tank. Fear is an essential motivating factor, okay? It's what you need to start. It's the spark. It's like the kindling of interest in preparedness. You need tinder, you need an ignition, and you need kindling to get the fire going. It's the fire under your ass to get going. But it's not what's going to fuel the fire long term. There needs to be an end goal. there needs to be an understanding that the life of preparedness and self-reliance and self-mastery is one that is good and valuable, and it can be enjoyable, and it's not something which has to come at the expense of something else. So just consider that. That's all I got for you today. The best way to support the channel, CanadianPreparedness.com, or like, comment, and share the video. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.
20 years ago, the US and UK invaded Iraq. Today, Tony Blair is free to go on television, has made a huge amount of money, the same with George Bush. At the same time, Julian Assange languishes in Belmarsh prison because he told the truth about this war.
Light them all up.
There is something deeply wrong with a society with those kind of priorities. When you look at the people who brought us the war in Iraq, the people who used everything at their disposal, the state machine, parliament, the media, when you look at what all those people did, nobody has faced any of the consequences. Even when the Chilcot report reported, Tony Blair set up his own press conference, paid for by the immense wealth which he now has, the many houses.